Well, it seems the Dark Knight has returned for yet another adventure, this time under the guidance of Telltale. Yup, Batman has received his very own episodic game series from the undisputed champions of the genre, but is it a good fit, or should they have left him in the shadows? I guess we might as well start by getting some basic things cleared up right away. As this is only the first episode of a 5-episode title, my comments will obviously only relate to this first part. Oh, I still have a few comments, but future episodes could obviously improve or worsen pretty much anything I mention. Basically, this is not my final opinion of the full game, just what I think so far. Either way, if you're familiar with any of Telltale's other titles, you should know what you'll get here. Basically, you just watch as the story unfolds before you, while occasionally making a few dialogue choices and or taking part in some QuickTime events. Okay, so there is the occasional crime scene investigation as well, but no, there's not really any more to it than that. If you think this sounds pretty lackluster, I can't really say you're that far off. Oh, I still think there's some entertainment here, but the gameplay isn't really the thing that will keep you invested. No, this is more about the story and characters, which thankfully are pretty engrossing, at least to a degree. The game follows Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, and his efforts to take down the notorious mobster Carmine Falcone, while trying to help his friend, District Attorney Harvey Dent, get elected as mayor. He also has to contend with Catwoman, who has been hired by someone to steal an encrypted hard drive full of secret information, as well as a quote-unquote shocking accusation against his family. You see, at a press conference announcing the opening of a new mental health hospital dedicated to the memory of Bruce's parents, a reporter claims to have information proving that the Wayne family has a long-running connection with organized crime and that their entire fortune was built on mob money. As Bruce investigates this claim, he eventually finds that it may not be a lie after all. Now, this story is pretty interesting, if relatively familiar. Okay, so I may not have seen this exact story in a game or film before, but apart from the aforementioned corruption accusations and a slightly different take on characters like Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin, there's not a whole lot here that feels all that new. It's not terrible, no, but it's certainly not all that surprising either. As far as the acting goes, that's pretty stellar across the board. Troy Baker does his usual excellent job as Bruce, and Laura Bailey's portrayal of Selena Kyle is marvelous. Sure, Jason Spizak might do a slightly broad Cockney accent, and it is pretty damn distracting to hear Victor Sullivan's voice coming out of Carmine Falcone, but even those performances are pretty great, all things considered. The only performance I feel might be slightly under par is Travis Willingham as Harvey Dent. Oh, don't get me wrong, it's still tolerable, but he does sound a bit bored and uninterested most of the time. It's a bit hard to explain, but it basically sounds like he's just reading the part and not actually being the part. He just doesn't sound all that invested. All that considered, the gameplay is where things fall apart. It really is just a series of QuickTime events coupled with a few dialogue choices once in a while. Granted, the different choices are supposed to affect the overall storyline, but at least so far, they only seem to affect the immediate outcome. Again, this is just the first episode, so several of the choices might not show their effect until later, but at least here, the only difference they seem to make is in the immediate responses and reactions of the people around you. The outcome is still going to be pretty much the same no matter what you do, only the relatively minor circumstances surrounding the result is going to vary. There is, however, one gameplay element I do enjoy quite a lot, the crime scene investigation segments. You see, at one point, Batman comes across a crime scene and has to investigate it and piece together what happened using his detective mode. This is actually a really interesting and far more involved feature than you might think. I just hope we get far more of it in future episodes. In the end, I think this is a decent start to the series, but I do feel a bit like it might have been slightly better as a straightforward animated feature of some sort. The gameplay is just so minimal that it can barely be called a game, though it can still be relatively compelling, in particular during the detective mode segments. Ultimately, I can't really recommend this, at least not as of yet. Luckily, this game is so short and I have so little to say about it that I also have time to mention another game that was released at the same time, namely Abzu, the debut title from Giant Squid, founded by the art director behind Flower and Journey. This game is also rather minimalistic, but in a completely different and, in my opinion, much better way. The quickest and easiest way to explain what Abzu is would be to say that it's an interactive artistic experience, but that's not necessarily doing it justice. You see, while I definitely would say that's a relatively fair description, it doesn't really tell you quite how mesmerizing it truly can be. Basically, Abzu has you control this diver-looking creature as he, she, it explores an underwater world of wonder. There is no dialogue and no storyline being explicitly told in any way, although there certainly is a story to discover and unfold. The thing is that you actually have to find and figure out the story for yourself, as everything is told through the visuals. This does mean that it's also open to a fair amount of interpretation, although I'm relatively certain that most people will at least agree on the basic gist of the game. That said, I don't think I want to go into the story all that much, as I feel that would be spoiling and ruining the game for those who might want to give it a try. After all, part of the fun here is discovering the various elements for yourself, and I don't think it will necessarily have the same impact and emotional resonance if you know too much about it in advance. What I can say is that using nothing but the visuals, this game manages to tell a more mesmerizing, emotional and evocative story in just a few hours than most big budget, fully voiced games and films can do in twice that time. Seriously, if this game doesn't make you feel some sort of emotions and or make you somewhat contemplative, I'd be very surprised and a bit worried. As for the gameplay, it is very simple, but it seems to be exactly enough. I'm honestly a bit staggered by how they've seemingly managed to find the perfect balance of simple and minimalistic, yet engrossing and engaging. I never once felt bored or like my actions had no effect. I was invested all the way through. This might seem a bit confusing though, considering the gameplay really boils down to swimming around the ocean looking at all kinds of fishies while figuring out various minor switch puzzles and the like. You can also collect seashells to unlock trophies, and occasionally you can find these little camera-looking things that will tag along and clear out certain obstacles for you. Other than that, you can also find and activate these hot spring coral-looking things to unleash even more sea life into the mix, and finally there are statues where you can sit and meditate while looking a bit closer at the creatures swimming all around you. You will also come across these temple things from time to time, but I can't really say much more without spoiling certain things. Like I said, this is all very simple, straightforward and easy to figure out, and even though this is also a fairly linear experience, it's still very enjoyable. Honestly, the visuals are so breathtaking at times and the music is so beautiful that it can be amazingly enjoyable just swimming around in a circle. When and if you do decide to actually move forward though, that turns out to be even better. Ultimately, this game is a truly awe-inspiring and actually quite surprising experience, and I would have to call it an experience. Oh, it's definitely still a game, but it's just so much more than that. It's an interactive painting, a masterful art piece, and an exceptional and emotional journey. In essence, it's an experience you won't soon forget.